So how exactly do you install JavaScript? Well, for the most part, you don't. Actually, all web browsers can run JavaScript, which is great because a lot of devices have web browsers on them. So when you write something with JavaScript, it will run on all sorts of devices and operating systems. So you have a few options for writing JavaScript. Let me show you a few things you can do to follow along with this course. You could download a code editor. Here I have Sublime Text. You could also use Visual Studio Code or Atom or any code editor. And I've created an HTML file because HTML files can be opened in web browsers. And I have these script tags. These are HTML tags, but within our script tags, we have our JavaScript. So if I open up this file in a web browser, it looks like this. Well, I can open up my JavaScript console, and then in the console, you can see it says Hello World. That's right from my JavaScript program. So whenever you do console.log, it's going to show in the console here. The first thing we'll talk about in JavaScript is comments. Comments are lines of code that JavaScript will intentionally ignore. They don't do anything. They're just used to create notes for yourself and others about what the code does. So if you do // you can make an inline comment. An inline comment means it's at the end of a line of code. For instance, I can put var number equals 5. That's a way to declare a variable, and we'll talk more about that later. But right now we're just talking about comments. You can see that this code is in color because the code editor knows that that's code that's going to run, and the comment is automatically grayed out because it's not going to run. We can also do an inline comment, or a multi-line comment. If we do a /*, and I can put this is a, and then I can put multi-line comment, and I'm going to end with a */. So it begins with a /* and ends with a */. And you can put as much text as you want in between these, and you can see this is all grayed out because it's all a comment. And then afterwards, I can put number equals 9, and you can see it will be in color again because it's no longer commented out. Now we're going to talk about data types and variables. In computer science, data is anything that is meaningful to the computer, and JavaScript provides 7 different data types that you can use within JavaScript. Now, some of the more obvious and most common are strings and numbers. A string is just any sort of text. A number is a number. Now let's go from the top. So undefined is something that hasn't been defined. You may have a variable that you haven't set to be anything yet. Null means nothing. So you've set it to be something, and that thing is nothing. So you can say this is null or nothing. A Boolean means true or false. We talked about strings. A symbol is an immutable primitive value that is unique. Now we'll talk more about those later. Number is a number, and an object can store a lot of different key value pairs. Again, we'll talk more about those later. Now, you are often going to set data into a variable. A variable allows computers to store and manipulate data in a dynamic fashion. It's basically a label to point to the data. A variable is almost like a box, and you can fill it with anything. You'll fill it with the data that you want. So to declare a variable, one way is to use the var keyword. Var stands for variable, and I can say my name. I can set this to anything. It can be any of the data types above, but it's common to set something to a string. So I can set my name to be Bo. Now, later, you can set it to be something else. I can say my name equals 8. And you can just set it to other data types later. Now, there are actually 3 ways to declare a variable in JavaScript. So var is one of them, and for a while that was the only way, but there are other ways too. There's a way called let. So I can say let our name, and then I can say equals free code camp. And then the other thing would be const. So I can do const pi equals and 3.14. Now, the difference between var, let, and const, var is going to be able to be used throughout your whole program. Let will only be used within the scope of where you declare that. Now, we're going to be talking about let and const more later, so I'm just giving you a brief overview of what they are now. Const is a variable that should never change. It can never change. So, like right up here, I declared my name, but then we changed it here. So it started out to be Bo, and we changed it to 8. Const, you can never change it. If you do try to change it, you'll get an error. Okay, that's all for now, but like I said, we'll be talking more about the different types of variables later. There's a difference between declaring variables and assigning variables. Here's how you assign a variable, var a and then the semicolon. I didn't mention this earlier, but you end all lines in JavaScript with a semicolon. Well, it's not actually required. You can actually just skip the semicolons completely, but most people recommend that you put a semicolon just so it's obvious where the end of the line is. So here we are just declaring a variable to be called a. And then here we are assigning a variable. We're declaring and assigning in one line. So we're declaring it var b, and then the equal sign is the assignment operator. It means that 2 is being assigned to b. We're not checking if b equals 2, though. We're just assigning 2 to b. So after that, we can actually assign other things. So I can say a equals 7. So now I've just assigned 7 to a. I didn't have to declare a because it was already declared. And I can also say that b equals a. So I've now assigned the contents of a to b. I'll put the semicolon there. One thing I want to tell you about is console.log. Console.log allows you to see things in the console. So I'm going to console.log a. And if I load this here, you can see down here in the console, it shows 7. So right now we've assigned a to be 7, and so when we console.log a, it shows 7 down there. If we put another console.log right here, this will allow us to show what a was up here and then down there. So console.log. Now if I run that, we can now see at first a was null, and then now it's 7. So here it's null, and then 7 down here. So you can check what variables are at various points in your program. Now I'll show you another example of initializing a variable to an initial value at the same time it's declared. So I'm going to say var a equals 9. So the var a is declaring it, and the equals 9 is initializing it with the assignment operator, which is the equal sign. Before we do anything to these variables, they are uninitialized. That means their value is undefined. We have not set them to anything. But it's simple to fix that. I'll just set this to 5. I'll set B to 10. And then we can set C to a string. It's going to be I am a string. We always have to put in quotation marks like that. So you can see a plus 1 is going to equal 6. 5 plus 1 equals 6. B equals B plus 5. That's going to be 15. And then C is now going to say, I am a string. Variable names and function names in JavaScript are case sensitive. That means the capitalization matters. So this declaration here is not the same as this assignment. Even though the letters are the same, the capitalization is not the same. So it's not going to assign correctly. And in here, you'll see there's an error if we try to run it because this has not been defined. it has not been declared. It's generally common practice to use camel case. So let me show you how we do that. Instead of studly cap var, it's going to be studly cap var. So the first letter is always going to be lowercase, and anytime you have a new word or new section of a word, you just capitalize the first letter. And so we can change this. This one's correct. So now we just go down here, studly cap var, and then we just do proper camel case, and then title case over. So now all these should be defined. So we declare them up here, we assign them right here, and then this is not going to give us any errors. It's going to behave exactly how we want it to behave. Adding two numbers in JavaScript is pretty straightforward. You just use the plus operator. So this says 10 plus 0, which equals 10. We can also do 10 plus 10, which is going to equal 20. If we do a console.log, and I can put sum here, and then you'll be able to see that the answer is 20. Right in the console, 10 plus 10 is 20. And subtraction is also what you would expect. We have the subtraction sign here. This says 45 minus 0. We can also do 45 minus 33, and then that would equal 12. So the difference variable equals 12 now. Multiplication in JavaScript uses this asterisk or a star symbol here. So this says 8 times 0, which is 0. Or we can change it to 8 times 10, which is 80. So now the product variable equals 80. You can divide in JavaScript with this slash symbol. So this says 66 divided by 0. We can change this to 33. So now 66 divided by 33 is 2. Quotient equals 2. To increment a number means to add 1 to it. So here we're incrementing my var by 1. So it starts at 87. 87 plus 1 is 88. There is a quicker way to increment a number. Instead of doing this, we can just do myvar plus plus. Myvar plus plus. Now we have incremented myvar from 87 to 88. We learned about incrementing a number with plus plus. You can also decrement a number with minus minus. That means subtracting 1. So right now, my var is going to equal 10. 11 minus 1 equals 10. We can do the same thing with the minus minus operator. So now my var still equals 10. We can also create decimal numbers with JavaScript. These are sometimes referred to as floating point numbers or floats. You can see this is one here, 5.7. It can be anything. I'm going to make one called my decimal, and then I'm going to store it as 0.009. Anything that has a decimal point in it is a decimal point number. Multiplying decimal point or floating point numbers is the same as multiplying integers. So we have 2.0 times 0.0. If I just change this to 2.5, now the answer to the product is going to be 5. And I can console.log that so you can see. If I just put product, and if we do the browser here, you'll see that the answer is 5. You can also divide decimal point numbers. So in this case, I'm going to change this to 4.4. So now the answer to quotient is 2.2. Quotient equals 2.2. The remainder operator looks like a percent sign, and it gives the remainder of the division of two numbers. So for instance, if I want to find out the remainder of 11 divided by 3, I can do remainder equals 11, and I'm going to put the percent sign, which is the remainder operator, 3. And 11 divided by 3 is 9. 11 minus 9 is 2. So the remainder is going to be 2. 11 remainder 3 is 2. The remainder operator is often used to determine if a number is even or odd. If you can divide a number by 2 and the remainder is 0, that means the number is even. It's common to want to add a number to a variable like this. See, a equals a plus 12. Well, a starts at 3 plus 12 is 15. So we're just adding 12 to whatever a is. Here we're adding 9 to whatever b is. Here we're adding 7 to whatever c is. This is such a common pattern that there's a shortcut to do the same thing. It's the plus equals operator. So instead of a equals a plus 12, we can do a plus equals 12. So this equals the same thing. So instead of b equals 9 plus b, we can do b plus equals 9. So now we're adding the value to the variable and assigning the answer to that variable. So again, here we can do plus equal 7. So that's just a shortcut. Previously, we learned about plus equals. Well, minus equals does the same thing, but subtracting. So this says a equals a minus 6. We started at 11. Minus 6 is going to be 5. So the new a is going to be 5. But we can shorten that. Instead of a equals a minus 6, we can do minus equals. This is just a shortcut that JavaScript has that means the same thing. That means a equals a minus 6, but it's just shortened. Same here, so we can do minus equals 15. C equals c minus 1, we can do c minus equals 1. So it just subtracts the number from the original value and then assigns that new value to the variable. Here we have a equals a times 5. Well, we can do the same thing as before. We can shorten this to a times equals 5. So that means the same thing. Here, we can do a times equals 3. And then c equals c times 10. We can shorten this to c times equal 10. And that's another shortcut for JavaScript. And there's also divide equal. So a equals a divided by 12. We can do a divided by equal 12. And then here we can just do divided by equal 4 or divided by equal 11. So another way of just dividing the variable by a new number and assigning that answer to the variable. We've already mentioned strings a little bit, but anytime you have some characters surrounded by quotation marks, they can either be single quotation marks, double quotation marks, or backticks. It's a string. These are called string literals, and you can create them just like you see above. I'm going to do a few more. So var my first name equals Bo, and var my last name equals Carnes. So that's how you create a string in JavaScript. Sometimes your string contains the quote symbol. Now, normally the quotes identify the beginning and the ending of the string. But what if you have something like this? I am a double quoted string inside double quotes. So I'm actually trying to use these quotes right inside the string, but the JavaScript doesn't know what to do about it. It thinks that this is the whole string. When it sees the first quote inside the string, it thinks we're at the end of the string. So there's something called an escape character. So if you want to escape a quote, that means it will no longer be considered the end of the string. I'm going to put a backslash. So if I put a backslash before each of these quotation marks, JavaScript no longer interprets it as being the last character in the string. So now you can see this is a full string. And then if I log this out, console.log, and I put my string, you'll see that it's not going to show the quotation marks. So, I mean, it's not going to show the backslashes. It shows the quotation marks without the backslashes because when we put backslash quotation mark, JavaScript knows that this should just mean a quotation mark. We talked about escaping a quote character like this, where you put a backslash before the quote character, so JavaScript knows that this is supposed to be a literal quote character inside the string. However, you're not going to have to escape quote characters very often because there are other methods of accomplishing the same thing of having a quote character within a string. So a common way is to use, instead of having your string start with double quotes, have it start with a single quote. So a string can either be surrounded by single quotes or double quotes. So this time we're just going to have single quotes. And now I can remove all of these escape characters from inside the string here. Okay, so now you can see that JavaScript still knows that this is a string, even though it has these double quotes inside. An additional thing you could do is use backticks. So if I put a backticks before at the beginning and the end of the string, now I actually can use single quotes and double quotes both within the string. But right now I'm just going to focus on showing you the double quotes or the single quotes with the double quotes inside. We talked about escaping a double quote character by using the backslash before the double quote. There's actually quite a few other things you can escape out. You can escape out a single quote character. You can escape out a backslash. In fact, anytime you're going to use a backslash, you're going to have to put 2 backslashes so the JavaScript knows that you're not trying to escape a character. You can also add a new line character or a carriage return, a tab, a backspace, or a form feed, all with doing a slash in the corresponding letter here. So let me show you an example. I'm going to put var myString equals, and we're going to make a multi-line string. So we're going to have the first line, and now I'm going to put backslash in to add a second line, and then I'm going to put a tab. So backslash T for the tab, and backslash to add a backslash. Now it's going to say second line. Now I'll do backslash, and then I'll just say third line. And if I were able to log out all of that, you would see 3 different lines, and you would see the tab and then the backslash character. You can concatenate strings with the plus operator. You can see here that we have 2 strings. I come first and I come second. They've been added together or concatenated with this. So the our string is now one long string that says I come first, I come second. I'll give you another example here. So we can say my string equals, this is the start, and then I'm going to put a space before the in quotation mark because when these get concatenated together, we want there to be a space between these 2 sentences. And I'll say this is the end. Now let's just see what that looks like. I'll do a console.log and do a myString, and let's see if I run this. We can see this is the start, this is the end. Just one long string. You can also concatenate strings using the plus equal operator. You can see here in this example, we have the R string equals I come first, and then we have the R string plus equals I comes second. So remember, just like when you're using numbers, plus equals means that you take whatever is on the end here and add it to the variable. So we've just added I come second onto the end of I come first. Let's do another example down here. My string equals, this is the first sentence, and then I'll put a space at the end because we're going to do my string, and I'll do the plus equals. This is the second sentence. Now, if I just do a console.log here of my string, we should see that those sentences have gone together. This is the first sentence. This is the second sentence. Good. You can concatenate strings together with variables. You can see here our name, free code camp. Hello, our name is, and then we add this variable, the our name variable, which is free code camp. Hello, our name is free code camp. How are you? Well, we're going to do the same thing down here. So I'm going to do my name equals Bo, and then my string is going to equal my name is, and then I'm going to add the variable name, which is my name, and then I'll continue the string here. Whoops, that's supposed to be a plus here. And I am well. See that I put a space here and here because you have to make sure you put appropriate spaces in. And let's see what that looks like. I'll do a console.log, and I'll just put my string here. If I show that, my name is Bo and I am well. Looks good. You can append variables to strings with this plus equals operator. You can see with this variable an adjective, which is set to the word awesome. And then we have another variable, free code camp is. And then we have the our string variable plus equal an adjective. So now our string is going to equal free code camp is awesome. So let me show you another example. We're going to say some adjective equals worthwhile. And now I'm going to use the plus equal. So my str plus equals, and then I can put some adjective. So now after we do the my string plus equals some adjective, my string is going to say learning to code is worthwhile. Sometimes you want to find the length of a string. JavaScript makes this easy. So we have the first name is set to Ada, but we just use the .length property to find the length. So first name .length. Remember, first name is Ada here, and then .length will return an integer, a number that has the number of characters in the string. So that will be 3. So let's try this again. Here's another example. Last name length equals last name. We just have to type in .length. And just to show you, let me console.log that, and you'll be able to see if I put in last name length, and if I run that, you'll see 8, because there are 8 characters in the word Lovelace. Bracket notation is a way to get a character at a specific index within a string. So you can see right here, we have the first name, Ada, and right here we have first name, and then here's the bracket notation. You can see there's brackets with a number inside. So most modern programming languages, like JavaScript, don't start counting at 1 like humans do. They start at 0, which is called zero-based indexing. So with the number 0, that refers to the first index of the string, which would be the A. So the A would be 0, D is 1, and then A is 2. So this first letter of first name, if we do first name with the bracket notation with a 0, that's going to equal A. So let me show you another example. Let's say we want to get the first letter of the last name. Again, I'm just going to do the bracket notation and put a 0 here. If I wanted the second letter, the O, I would put a 1 here. So if I console.log, we can see what it came up with. So console.log, first letter of last name. And if we look in the console, L, because the first letter of the last name is L. Strings are immutable, meaning they cannot be altered once created. This does not mean that they cannot be changed, just that the individual characters of a string literal cannot be changed. So look at this example. My string, and then we're going to use bracket notation to choose the first letter. So it currently says Jello World. We want the first letter to change to an H to say Hello World. But if I run that, there's going to be an error because of the immutability of strings. Now we can still change this to Hello World, but we can't just change an individual letter like that. So we're going to have to do my string equals, and I'm just going to have to type in the whole thing, which is Hello World. And now it will change to the word Hello World. You can use bracket notation to get any character position in a string. So earlier we did the first position, but here's how you get the second position. Remember the 0 index, so 1 is the second position, 0 is the first position. We can also get the third letter of the last name using the brackets. We'll just put 2 in the brackets to get the third letter of the last name. You can also use bracket notation to find the last letter in a string, even if you don't know how many letters are in the string. You do it based on the length. So if you look right here, in the brackets, we have an expression to be evaluated. First name.length minus 1. So the length is 3. 3 minus 1 is 2. The reason why we're doing a minus 1 is because, remember, we count starting at 0. So the length minus 1 is going to be the last index of the name. So we can do that same thing here. To get the last letter of the last name, I can just do last name dot length minus 1. And that's going to get the last letter of the last name, which is the E right here. We saw how to use bracket notation to get the last letter of a string. You can also do the third to last letter or fourth to last letter. So you just subtract however much you want from the length of the string. So we have the bracket notation, first name.length minus 3. That's going to get the third to last letter. So if we want the second to last letter into this variable here, we do something similar. We just do last name.length, and then we're going to subtract 2 to get the second to last character of the string. We are going to use our knowledge of strings to build a Mad Libs style word game. In a Mad Lib game, you are provided sentences with some missing words, like nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs, and then you fill in the missing pieces with words of your choice to make a sentence that could be funny and hopefully makes a little bit of sense. So let me show you how you do this. This also uses a function. Now, we haven't talked about functions yet. I'm going to explain those more later, but for now, just go with it, because that's not the point of this lesson for now. But this function called word blanks, you can call the function and you have to pass in certain types of words. You pass in a noun, an adjective, a verb, and an adverb. So down here, you can see that we're calling the function called word blanks. That's the function name here, and we're passing in a noun, an adjective, a verb, and an adverb. So the point is that we are going to use all these words that are passed in to make a sentence. So we know that var result equals an empty string at first, and then we have to use all these words in result, and then the result is going to be returned from this function, and eventually will be logged out onto the screen with this console.log. So what I'm going to do here is do result plus equals. We're going to use the plus equals to add something to this result using all the noun, the adjective, the verb, and the adverb. So let's see, it's going to say the, and we'll use the adjective, my adjective, in this case will be the big, and then let's put the noun, my noun, because adjectives are words that describe nouns, the big dog, and then we're going to say what this noun was doing, the verb, my verb. The big dog ran, and then where does he run to? To the store. And then we're going to add, oh, we need a space here. So there's a space between this to the store, and then we're going to add the final adverb. So now we have to add a period. And there's one more thing we have to add, or a few more things. So right now, it's my adjective, my noun, my verb, and there's no spaces in between those. So if I run that, you can see what that's going to look like in the console. It just said, big dog ran, with no spaces. So we're going to have to add some spaces in here also. Let's do that. And now it's going to take in the noun, adjective, verb, and adverb, and then put it into that sentence. So one cool thing is we can actually pass in some different words. So like, for instance, if I copy this, I'm going to paste it. Instead of dog, I will put for the noun bike, and then adjective, I'll put slow. And then for the verb, I'll put flew, and the adverb, I'll put slowly. And now, if we look in the console, we have two sentences. The big dog ran to the store quickly. The slow bike flew to the store slowly. Arrays allow you to store several pieces of data in one place. So look at this example, our array. Now arrays always start with a bracket and then end with a bracket to show the beginning and ending of the array. And every element in the array is separated by a comma. So you can see here, the first element is a string, the second element is a number. And you can have more and more elements. You just put comma and you can keep adding elements. And the elements can be any data type. You can see here we have a string and a number, but you can also use arrays or floating numbers or really any sort of other data type in your array. So let's see another example. So let's do my array Quincy, and then for a number we'll do 1 because Quincy is number 1. When one of the elements in an array is another array, that's called a nested array or a multi-dimensional array. You can see here's the beginning of the array and here's the end of the array, but the first element in this array is another array with 2 elements of its own. Same with here, the second element is an array. So this is 2 arrays within another array. So we can do that here. Here's another example. So our first element in the array will be an array with a string and a number. And then I'll put a comma to put the second element of the array, which will be another array with a string and a number. Earlier, we learned how to use bracket notation to find a specific index in a string. You can do the same thing with arrays. So look at this array. Our array, we have 3 elements, 50, 60, 70. And these have the indexes 0, 1, 2. So with this R array, with the bracket notation in the 0, that's going to be index 1, which is going to equal 50. So we can do the same thing here. my array equals 50, 60, 70. So let's try to find the first element in that array. So var r my data equals my array, and then I'm going to do index 0. I could do index 1, index 2, and then if we console.log that, we can see for sure what that is. So if I put my data, and we can see in the console, it's 50. You can use array indexes to modify arrays. Now, we tried to do this earlier with strings using bracket notation, and we were not able to modify a string using bracket notation, but with arrays, you can. So the original array is 18, 64, 99, and then we're going to use the array index of 1. Now, 1 is going to be the second number, or 0, 1, 2, and this number 64 is going to be set to 45. So the new array is going to be 18, 45, 99. Let's try it again with this, 18, 64, 99. So let's do my array, and then instead of doing the second digit, I'm going to do the first digit in the array, the first index, which would be index 0, and I will say equals 45. So now this array has been updated. So if I do console.log and then do my array, we'll see that the array is now 45, 64, 99. You can also use bracket notation to select an element in a multidimensional or array of arrays. So you can see this array here, we have our outer array, but inside that array are more arrays. The elements of the array are other arrays, and the last element of the array actually has an array in this. So this is a 3-layer deep array right here. So to access an array of arrays or an element within an array that's within an array, you use a double bracket notation. So if you see this example here, my array, the first bracket is 0. That's going to get the first element in the array, which would be right here. And then that element is an array. So the second bracket would be the index of the array within the array. So this 0 would point to here. So let's try to figure out how we can select a value equal to 8. Well, let's see. I see an 8 right here. So let's figure out what this first number should be. Well, let's count. 0, 1, 2. So the third array would be index 2. Now, we want to go 0, 1. Now we have to do index 1 to get the second number in the third array. So let's test to see if that equals 8. So I'll do console.log and then do my data here. And we'll see if that equals 8. It does. We did it. You can append data to the end of an array with the push function. So see, an array has been set up here, our array, Stimson J cat, and then we take our array right here and use the push function to push into the next element in the array another array here. So now it's going to look like this. We can see at the end of the original array, we've pushed this other array at the end. So let's try it again down here. We have my array, and you can see what we have, each element in the array is another array. So I am going to do my array dot push, and then I can push something on the end here, which will be like above another array. So this is going to say dog, 3, and now we've pushed this onto the array. We can remove an item from an array with the pop function here. So see this pop here? And then we know it's a function because of the parentheses at the end of the word pop. So the array starts with 1, 2, 3. So now we do this array.pop, and it's going to remove the last element, which is the 3, and then it's going to put it right into this variable here. So now, as you can see down here, remove from our array now equals 3, and then our array is going to equal 1, 2, because the 3 has been popped off. So we can do the same thing here. So remove from my array equals, and I'm going to do my array dot pop. And we can see what the array is going to equal now if I just do console.log my array. And if you do this, we can see that the array only has the one item, the one array, instead of the two arrays. The shift function is very similar to the pop function, except it removes the first element of the array instead of the final element. So we see the shift function on the end of the array here, and the array is the same as before, but now the first element, Stimson, is being removed. After we shift off the first element, the array is going to equal jcat, and the removed from our array is going to equal Stimson. So let's do another example down here. We're going to do a shift again. So I'm going to do equals my array dot shift. And now the my array is just going to equal dog3, and the remove from my array is going to equal John 23. The unshift function is similar to the push array function. While push adds an element to the end of the array, unshift adds an element to the beginning of the array. So let's look through this example code. We have the array, Stimson jcat. We're going to shift off the first element, remove the first element. So our array is jcat. Now we're going to unshift or add an element at the beginning, which is the string happy. So the array will now be happy jcat. So let's try again. This time the array is John 23, dog 3. Because of the shift, we've shifted off the John 23. And now I'm going to unshift something. So I'll do my array dot unshift. Now we're going to add something to the beginning of the array. We'll do Paul 35. So now the array is just going to be Paul 35, dog 3. Let me give you another example of nested arrays. This will be a shopping list. So inside this array, we're going to have another array, and we're going to have items. Cereal, how many boxes? 3 boxes. We also need some milk. Let's get 2 cartons of milk. Let's get some bananas. 3 bunches of 3 bananas. We'll also get some juice. 2 containers of juice. And finally, we will get some eggs. We'll get 12 eggs. And now we've created an array of arrays, which is our shopping list. Functions allow us to create reusable code in JavaScript. This is how a function is set up. We have the word function, then we have the function name. There's always parentheses here, and you can pass information into the parentheses. We'll talk about that later. And then we have these curly brackets. So this is the opening curly bracket, and then we have the closing curly bracket. And everything inside the curly bracket is run anytime the function is called or invoked. So here the function is being called by just putting the function name with parentheses after the name. So every time this function is called just like this, the console is going to say, "Hey world." So if we load the console right now, you can see it says, "Hey world." And if I just copy this and paste it a few times, we'll see that it's going to say, "Hey world, hey world, hey world" in the console. Since we have run the function 3 times, we see the words "Hey world" 3 times. So now I'm going to create my own function that's going to be very similar. So we'll do function reusable function. And this time it's going to say something slightly different. It's going to say, hi world, instead of hey world. And now I can call the function down here, just like this, reusable function. Oh, forgot to put the parentheses, that's important. And now you see hey world and hi world in the console. Parameters are variables that act as placeholders for the values that are to be input to a function when it is called. So we have defined a function right here called our function with args, and inside the parentheses we see the letters A and B. Now these can be any name. We could call these anything, not just A and B. They could really be any words up here, and that means that when this function is called, we're going to pass data into the function or input data into the function. So you can see the example here where we're calling the function, and instead of saying A and B in the parentheses, we're actually passing the values 10 and 5. So when the function runs, it can use the information that's passed into the function. So in this case, it says console.log A minus B. Well, that's going to be 10 minus 5 because the numbers 10 and 5 have been passed into the function, and that's going to output 5. So I'm going to create a function that's very similar to that function. This one is going to be called function with args, and it's also going to accept an A and B, but we could call that anything we want. And inside, instead of subtracting A minus B, we're going to do A plus B. Now, I'm just going to call this function with args, and I'll pass in 10 and 5, and let's see what that looks like in the console. So first,